Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. This week, all eyes are on Jeju, where the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer is visiting South Korea for high-stakes bilateral meeting with Trade Minister Ahn Duk-geun. The meeting, held on the sidelines of the APEC Ministerial meeting, comes at a critical time. Tariff negotiations between two nations have been dragging for months, and hopes are now pinned on what's being called the July package to break the deadlock. But the timing seems to be tight. With South Korea's new administration preparing to take office and the U.S. fast-tracking trade deals with UK and China, pressure is mounting on Seoul and Washington to find common ground. For more on this, we are joined online by Song Soo-young, Professor of Business and Economics at Chung-Ang University. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for inviting me.
And also joining us from Texas is Hwa-kyun Kim, Professor of Banking and Finance at Texas A&M University's Mays Business School. Great to see you again.
Pleasure to be here.
So, Professor Kim, let's begin with the APEC Ministerial meeting in Jeju, where Seoul's top trade officials, Chung In-gyo, head of trade negotiations, and Industry Minister Ahn Duk-geun held back-to-back talks with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. So with bilateral tariff negotiations still making little headway, what is the significance and the importance of these high-level bilateral meetings, Professor?
Well, despite the slow progress on these negotiations, still I think it is important in the sense that these meetings can be an important platform for managing and potentially resolving these current trade surplus or tension issues triggered by the U.S. imposition of these steep tariffs, especially 25% duties on the Korean automobiles and some other goods. As we all know, Korea relies heavily on exports and recorded some good amount of the trade surplus for a few, decade in some sense. So that can be somewhat, of a big issue to the U.S., especially, the vulnerable to these type of protectionist measures. So by engaging directly with the U.S. officials, I think this is going to be at least a good chance to talk about the Korean, the voice and the situation. So at least the both sides seem to have agreed to work toward the comprehensive July package that goes beyond tariffs and covering non-tariff barriers, other security issues, and also the currency policies. So like I said, it can work as a platform for South Korea to emphasize its strengths, such as the shipbuilding and some of the other things that the Korea can offer, not just about this. And also, I think the currency policy is going to be something that Korea can use also as leverage as well. So because of the Korean political situation, especially this upcoming presidential election, these bilateral talks are probably going to be somewhat stagnant, I think, in terms of like the decision, but at least I think it's going to help, earn some time and despite this tight deadline, I think, and also they can at least have some basic ideas about the consensus points that they can reach eventually.
Right, so it's a stepping stone that could lead to a better deal. Now, today it has been reported actually that the trade ministers from both countries agreed to begin full-fledged discussions next week in the U.S., focusing on 6 key areas, including balanced trade and non-tariff measures. Professor Song, how do you assess this development? And would you say that the negotiations are entering a full-scale phase from the second round of technical talks next week?
I believe this is some extension of the bilateral talk between the Greer and the Korean representative of the Minister of Trade in Jeju, Seogwipo, as some sideline meeting in APEC meeting. I believe that particularly the all areas, tariff, non-tariff measures, economic security, investment, collaboration, and the currency policy should be on the plate to talk about the issues. But I think the full-fledged and the detailed needs more elaboration between those two countries. However, I believe the U.S. would like to just their interest lies in some foreign direct investment from Korea to the United States, particularly in shipbuilding areas. So that would be the more of concern by among the U.S. And however, that could be used as a leverage for Korea to reduce further tariff. But the progress or the talk should take long, and the reason is the longer the talk, it would be more favorable to Korea because U.S. they have to deal with China and all other countries, and even though they have a reprieve for the 90 days, but further otherwise, the United States could be some isolated because even though they succeed in some bilateral discussion about the tariff, but the other countries, they would like to set up some kind of platform that could foster and promote some free trade, excluding without U.S. And so that is the primary concern of United States. They not only they maintain their status, and also they would like to succeed in building some specific ties or relations with other countries through the bilateral meetings. So to that regard, I think we don't need to hurry right now, and because we have to wait how the other countries negotiation discussion has been played out and evolved.
Right, so we don't really need to rush at this time. Now, Professor, then adding another layer to this negotiations, before the high-level talks even began, Greer at Washington's request met top executives from Korea's shipbuilding industry, including Hyundai's Chung Gi-sun and Hanwha's Kim Hee-chul. Do you think this signals that shipbuilding cooperation is now emerging as a strategic bargaining chip in broader trade discussions?
Yes, clearly. Because Jamieson Greer has met both the top person in the Hyundai heavy industry and Hanwha Oceans, and so they met with the CEOs and the high level the owners of those two conglomerates in Korea, and currently, as far as I know, Hyundai has. They have anticipating some shipbuilding in Louisiana, and and the shipbuilding dock is under construction maybe, and also the Hanwha Ocean has been already. They started some jobs in the Philly shipyard, and they take care of some Navy, U.S. Navy maintenance and revamp. And the overhaul of the ships and the United States. So this looks like the shipbuilding area is the United States they don't have any capacities and they don't have some manpowers to operate those shipbuildings. So they want to have some direct investment from Korea, and so then this should be used as a leverage to reduce the further tariff in other areas, but should not be all. And because we have to always be prepared for some alternative ways when there is a change and fluctuation of tariff again in the future between the U.S. and South Korea, then we have to have some other. It should be a real alternative should be prepared.
So this shipbuilding sector was always a key piece of Korea's industrial strength. So if it's on the table as a formal discussion point, it could possibly reshape leverage on both sides as well. Now, looking at the broader picture, Professor Kim, the U.S. has recently struck tentative deals with the U.K. and China involving tariff reductions and easing of non-tariff barriers. What's behind this acceleration in Washington's trade negotiation efforts?
Well, I mean, comparing these two countries, the UK and China, So clearly the UK is on the much lighter side in terms of like trade surplus or the tariff, and also the typical, the strategic alliance wise, UK probably is one of the closest alliances, right, with the US, while the China is on the other polar opposite, like, probably the most, important country in terms of like, doing this trade war and tariffs and everything. So in some sense, this, the preliminary, the results of these tariff talks between this, the two of these countries with the US, it's kind of showing like some form of like the minimum and maximum of like their trade deals or the tariff deals that they want to strike eventually. So I think, as you can see, the overall acceleration of these the countries kind of set the sort of like a range of this tariff talks also with the other countries. So in some sense, showing some hints, but at the same time, this one also considers the difficult situation now the U.S. has some after doing this very massive tariffs impositions to virtually all countries. Basically, now they're facing this domestic backlash and economic strain potentially. I guess the administration, while showing this like the whole range, it kind of shifted toward a little bit towards negotiation, especially like the 90-day truce with China and also somewhat reduced tariffs and post certain non-tariff barriers. And also, I think these kind of things at the end of the day can also change and shift. So they still try to have like, the bargaining cards and things like that. So overall, I think this trade negotiation efforts is at least show some of like, the conversion toward a little more negotiation rather than just one-sided tariff impositions. But at the same time, like I said, it's actually showing this full range. So I think Korea is probably somewhere in between. So I think the Korea has to prepare against these kind of this additional tariffs and more talks.
We will have to take that into consideration. Now, staying in that context, Professor Kim, South Korea has set a goal to conclude a deal by July, coinciding with the launch of the new administration, of course. But if the U.S. pushes for an earlier outcome, how do you think South Korea should respond? And what lessons can we draw from the recent U.S. deals made with UK and China?
Well, at least I think Korea has a good excuse. So the political situation is not quite suitable for this early, the deal. And obviously, in a few weeks, I think there will be a big the election, presidential election, and then the whole administrative system is going to, at least in terms of like the prime ministers and everyone's going to change. So if you just make a very hurried deal, then I think this is going to be very burdensome to the next the administration. Therefore, you actually have every excuse to just slow this down, and the U.S. also knows this. Although they may just the U.S. tries to push this, but there's some physical limitations or constraint that South Korea cannot really fully handle this. So I think it's a very unfortunate event, but I think because of this huge political uncertainty, in a sense, I think that South Korea has some leverage actually just to delay this talk. I mean, within this big picture, they can still make some agreements, but I think, the details, which is important always, and for item by item or sector by sector, and together with, the help with the shipbuilding and other, the area of semiconductors, cars and things like that, I think, they can push this as much as possible, seeing what other countries are doing. Like I said, at least the U.S. showed the range between the China and UK. So I think probably it's better if it gets closer to the UK deal or even better deal as time goes by.
Right. So buying time would be very helpful, and South Korea's current political situation would be sort of an advantage in this situation. Then, Professor Kim, let's also shift to another issue, exchange rates. Working level discussions on this front reportedly began in earnest last week as part of broader trade agenda. Now, with concerns that the U.S. may pressure South Korea towards a stronger won, reports suggest currency policy might be left off the table. How do you see this playing out?
So exchange rate is always hard to understand. So in terms of like the trade surplus situation, this weak Korean won is a puzzle because the South Korea has been earning US dollars. I mean, trade surplus means that the US dollar is the flooding in to South Korea. That means the value of Korean won should increase, but that's exactly not the opposite case. The Korean won has been depreciating a lot for the last 2 years or something. And then if we look at the interest rate differences, which is another important way to understand the currency exchange rates, then clearly the US interest rate is much higher than the Korean won. And that also, that means the Korean won is going to flowing out to US and other countries. That actually can weaken the Korean won, I think. So that's probably one of the key reasons why the Korean won has been depreciated. Having said that, now the U.S. actually really wants to devalue their currency in some sense to fix a little bit of this trade imbalance situation. So I think that could actually lead to the stronger Korean won if other things are still the same. But at the end of the day, the South Korea, unlike China or other countries, not really heavily manipulating the exchange rate. It's just a little bit of the management level. So the talk is not going to be that easy because it largely depends on the first two items that I just talked about, like the trade surplus and also the interest rate changes or differences. Therefore, as time goes by, if the monetary policy changes and also the trade surplus conditions change, I mean, there will be some adjustment of the exchange rates anyway. Having said that, I think if somehow the U.S. kept pushing this because we still want to actually fix that, similar to some Plaza Accord like in 1985 or something, well, I guess like the export actually competitiveness may decrease a bit, but at least Korea is going to earn, I think, the strong Korean won, the status, which is not bad. So I think it could be a good legitimate, I think, the leverage point for Korea. I think in case they really want it, then there's a way. If there's a way that I think South Korea can handle this, okay, so maybe we can have like a strong Korean won. So what do you want us to do? Actually, something like this.
We'll have to see on that. Now, so given this currency discussions, along with the ongoing trade negotiations between U.S. and China, the $1 exchange rate has shown considerable volatility. Professor Song, now, what is your outlook on how the market trend might evolve from right here?
Actually, the Professor Kim has explained very in details and precisely the mechanism behind what is the factors, what is the important factor that drive the exchange rate change between particularly in South Korea won and US dollars. But the recent development of the depreciation of the US dollar's value is, I believe it is because of in the process of the US dollar has enjoyed some exorbitant privilege for the past several decades, despite the share of the world GDP taken by the US has been declining. So it means that right now, the reason why the US dollar's value has maintained its status and reserve currency in the world, it has been because of US at least was a credible institution has been implemented and the independent Federal Reserve System is working. But all these are right now some fading away. So that means new reserve currency or the US dollars cannot be trusted anymore, even though U.S. economy is the strongest in the world, but among the other countries, they could foster and promote the free trade, and they could use some other settlement currency because not affected by some discretion or some capriciousness of the caprice of the U.S. government president. So to that regards, the recent change of volatility of South Korean won exchange rate is because of the other countries they reduced their trust on the U.S. dollars is reduced. That is the main reason. And then, as Professor Kim has mentioned, maybe stronger Korean won for the time being would be rather beneficial to South Korean small and medium enterprise. Of course, that could be a burden to some top-class companies in Korea, such as Samsung, SK Hynix, and shipbuilding industries. Their primary export is U.S., the advanced countries. To that regard, the depreciation of Korea would be better for them. But for the small and medium enterprises who rely on some trade between China and other Southeast Asian countries, then the stronger South Korean won would be better for them.
Right, and markets are definitely clearly watching on how this would evolve, and we will also keep close tabs on that. But as for now, we will have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Kim and Professor Song. We appreciate it so much.
Thank you very much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.